Avro Lancaster bomber. Cross-section, World War II. Flying low under the night sky, the British Avro Lancaster bomber quietly crossed the English Channel en route to Germany, taking the fight straight to the heart of the country for the final 3 years of World War II. The inception of the Lancaster. The British Avro Lancaster was a heavy bomber that was primarily used as a nighttime bomber during World War II and spearheaded the Allied strategic bombing campaign devised by RAF Commander-in-Chief of Bomber Command Arthur Bomber Harris against Nazi Germany. Intended as the answer to issues with the Avro Manchester, the Lancaster was designed by Roy Chadwick and the Avro team, with the first prototype deploying in January 1941. A year later, in March 1942, it was used operationally for the first time, in a production run that lasted until 1946. Needing a 7-man crew, over 7,377 Lancasters were built, requiring a massive 1.1 million men and women involved in its production across 920 companies. Only 3,445 Lancasters survived the war, as they usually only managed 21 missions before being lost in action. Although its most instrumental and important period of use was during the war, the Lancaster was refitted, updated, and improved after the war, continuing its use by the RAF Bomber Command and Royal Canadian Air Force, conducting, among other things, aerial surveys and long-distance flights. By the time it was retired in 1954 and replaced by the better-developed Avro Lincoln, 15 variants on the original design had been created. Now, only 17 Lancasters remain, with only 2 capable of flight. One of them flies in formation with a Spitfire and Hurricane in the Battle of Britain memorial flight at air shows in Britain and special events.
Alert! Simple History is under attack! Just last week we thought PayPal emailed us to update our information, but it was actually an underhanded enemy trying to steal our details. If we had not had our eagle-eyed sponsor Aura on hand, they could have caught them before it was too late, securing Simple History's information for the good of the country. You may not realize it, but every time you go online, you're under siege by unseen enemies. They're busy creeping through the long grass of the internet, trying to sneak up unprovoked and steal all your personal and financial information. But Aura shields you against identity theft, provides a secure VPN, and immediately notifies you if it finds your details on the dark web. You and your family are protected when online using their all-in-one app. No more paying for 7 different systems. That's not all. Aura's defense system means no viruses, malware, or spyware can break through. Store all your passwords behind their security wall and feel instantly more protected when online. If you want to feel secure on the front lines of the internet, try a free 2-week trial of Aura today. You'll be horrified by how much the enemy already knows. Just click the link in the description to start your free trial or scan the QR code on screen now.
A Lancaster Mk1 composition. The Lancaster bomber measured 69 feet 6 inches in length, had a wingspan of 102 feet, and stood at 20 feet 6 inches in height off the ground. Weight. The Lancaster was heavier than the average plane and much heavier than the standard German bomber at the time, weighing over 2 times as much. When empty, the plane was approximately 36,900 pounds, or 16,738 kilos, but was capable of carrying almost its whole weight again, being able to haul 33,100 pounds, or 15,114 kilos in fuel and bombs. This also meant that it was one of the only planes capable of carrying the RAF's largest bombs, including the deadly 12,000-pound bunker busters. These features also allowed the Dam Busters raid, codenamed Operation Chastise, to take place, which wouldn't have been possible without the Lancaster's superior bomb-holding capacity. Modified to fit British engineer Barnes Wallace's bouncing bomb underneath the fuselage, it was the only plane capable of carrying out the mission thanks to its elongated bomb bay. Engines. The Lancaster was powered by 4 Rolls-Royce Merlin XX V12 liquid-cooled piston engines, driving 3-bladed propeller units. Each could produce up to 1,280 horsepower and 954 kilowatts of power. This meant that at 15,000 feet it could cruise at 200 miles per hour, but also had a top speed of 275 miles per hour. 6 fuel tanks were located in the wings and could hold 2,154 gallons of fuel between them, so this averaged out at nearly 1 gallon used per mile. With a bomb load of 7,000 pounds, its range was a lengthy 2,530 miles, and the Lancaster had a service ceiling of 24,500 feet, a huge improvement over the Manchester's Avro engine. But as the war went on, engine production became more difficult due to a shortage of supplies, and was forced to turn elsewhere to the British Hercules' variant of the Lancaster, which used air-cooled radial engines instead. However, these were vastly inferior, so the issue was finally resolved by importing brand new Merlin engines from the US after they had joined the war. This popular variant of the Merlin engine was also used in several other RAF aircraft, including the Hawker Hurricane and Spitfire fighter planes. Bomb sights. Initially, Lancasters used the Mark IX course-setting bomb sight, also known as CSBS. This was a rudimentary design that had been in production since its creation by Harry Wimperis in 1917. It involved squinting through wires that had to be manually set, meaning they lacked flexibility and the ability to easily change and adapt. But by 1943, this was replaced by the Mark XIV vector-based bomb sight, now recognized as the first modern bomb sight. It allowed the bomb aimer to input information at the start of the flight and a computer to automatically and continuously calculate the trajectory of the bombs and adjust accordingly during missions. This was instrumental in making the Lancaster a big-time part of the nighttime bombing raids. Crew. Something that is often forgotten in the war films and the media is the actual age of the average soldier. Although slightly older than those on foot, bomber crews were made up of 7 barely adult men with an average age of just 22. They each had their own role in flying the plane. The pilot, of course, flew the plane and assumed the leadership role, while the engineer, who looked after the engine, sat next to him. Behind them sat the navigator and wireless operator, who plotted the plane's course and monitored radio messages respectively. The other 3 crewmen operated the weapons. There was the bomb aimer, who sat at the front and doubled as the nose gunner, guiding the plane into position. And the final 2 operated as the rear and mid gunners. Of the crew, the rear gunner was the least likely to survive, as he was physically separated from his parachute, meaning that in the event of a bailout, he needed to both access and correctly put his parachute on before exiting the Lancaster. Armament. The Lancaster was armed with 8.303-inch caliber Browning machine guns across 3 hydraulically powered turrets. 2 sat in the nose turret, 2 in the dorsal spine, and 4 in the powered tail turret. Unlike the American bombers, the Lancaster excluded the addition of a ventral belly turret, although a few variants did have one, but these were phased out by 1942 as they were not very successful. Bomb load. As already mentioned, the Lancaster's true uniqueness lay in its bomb-carrying abilities, outstripping any other plane in the World War II aviation sphere and allowing for superior nighttime raids and attacks over German soil. In total, the Lancaster had a 33-foot-long bomb bay and was capable of carrying a 14,000-pound bomb load at a speed of 200 miles per hour. This also meant it was able to carry some of the largest high-capacity cookie bombs, weighing between 1,000 and 4,000 pounds. Alongside these, the Lancaster would carry high-explosive, general-purpose, medium-case, or smaller incendiary bombs, such as 24 30-pound or 236 4-pound incendiary bombs. Later, they started modifying the Lancaster bomb bay doors to make them capable of carrying even larger 8,000 and 12,000-pound HC cookies. The drawback of the bomb load and the bomb bay doors was the lack of an easy exit route for the crew, with the hatch being smaller than those on other aircraft and far more difficult to get out of, and almost impossible wearing a parachute. It meant that the crews of stricken Lancasters only had a 15% successful bailout rate, compared to as high as 25% in Halifax's and 50% in American bombers. Communications. With one of the Lancaster's primary occupations during the war being part of the massed nighttime bomb raids in Germany, communications between the crew of the plane and other aircraft and even base was essential. The wireless operator, who sat behind the navigator, monitored radio and communications, as the plane had a radio receiver and separate transmitter that could be used for voice and Morse code messages. Part of his job would involve identifying friend or foe in the night sky and giving false signals to confuse or derail the enemy. If they entered active combat, part of his role would also be acting as a lookout through the plexiglass canopy at the back of the cockpit, in order to notify the pilot and gunners of any enemy aircraft activity. The rear gunner was also instrumental here, as the Germans often attacked from behind, meaning it was he who would see them first and be tasked with alerting the rest of the crew. The pilot would often then guide the plane into a corkscrew turn to avoid enemy fire. During the late 1940s, the RAF continued to use the Lancaster to carry out reconnaissance and aerial surveys of Central and East Africa. It was finally superseded by the development of the Avro Lincoln, which was essentially a refined version of the Lancaster. But it wasn't until December 1953 that the final Bomber Command Lancaster was retired, and the final Reconnaissance Lancaster in service for the RAF also retired less than a year later in 1954. Overhauled Lancasters continued to be used by 4 squadrons in the French naval aviation for another 10 years on reconnaissance and search and rescue missions before finally being retired.